Thomas Massie and Kash Patel were not supposed to create the most unsettling silence in a congressional hearing. But the moment Massie opened his mouth, the entire room felt like it shifted. It wasn't because he raised his voice or made accusations. It was because he asked a question so simple, so direct, that the FBI director hesitated, long enough for millions of people watching to feel something wasn't right. That pause, that flicker of uncertainty, instantly locked the attention of everyone who saw it.
Gentleman, yes, back.
Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous consent request.
Gentleman's recognized.
So I've got 4 documents I'd like to introduce into the record. The first one is Jeffrey Epstein's 6 story played out for years in plain sight. And Acosta is quoted in here saying, "I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone." The second document is entitled, "What Epstein's Bodyguard Warned About His CIA Connections." The third document is from Fox Digital. It's titled, "Epstein's Private Calendar Reveals Planned Meetings with Obama Admin Official CIA Chief." And the last document is Wall Street Journal article that highlights Ehud Barak's 36 meetings with Jeffrey Epstein. He was the former Prime Minister of Israel and head of military intelligence for Israel. It may have held that title when he met Epstein, and then, yes.
Without objection, the gentleman will hold for a second. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one UC request. This is Judge Engelmeyer's decision from August in U.S. versus Epstein, stating the government's 100,000 pages of Epstein files dwarfs the 70-odd pages of Epstein grand jury materials.
Without objection, the gentleman from Kentucky is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Patel, I watched some of your Senate hearing yesterday when Senator Kennedy asked you, "You've seen most of the files. Who, if anyone, did Epstein traffic these women to besides himself?" You replied, according to the transcript, "There is no credible information that he trafficked them to anyone else." You also said somewhere in the hearing and here today that the problem is that the case files are constrained by limited search warrants from 2006 to 2007 and that the non-prosecution agreement hamstrung future investigations. Those constraints only apply to Southern District of Florida. They do not apply to Southern District of New York, the location of the 2019 sex trafficking indictment, which produced many things, including a series of FD 302 documents. According to victims who cooperated with the FBI in that investigation, these documents in FBI possession, your possession, detail at least 20 men, including Mr. Jess Staley, CEO of Barclays Bank, who Jeffrey Epstein trafficked victims to, victims including minors, such as Virginia Roberts Giuffre, may she rest in peace. That list also includes at least 19 other individuals, one Hollywood producer worth a few $100 million, one royal prince, one high-profile individual in the music industry, one very prominent banker, one high-profile government official, one high-profile former politician, one owner of a car company in Italy, one rock star, one magician, at least 6 billionaires, including a billionaire from Canada. We know these people exist in the FBI files, the files that you control. I don't know exactly who they are, but the FBI does. Have you launched any investigations into any of these people, and have you seen these 302 documents?
Sir, I have asked my FBI agents to review the entirety of the Epstein files and bring forth any credible information, and we're working with Congress not only to divulge that information and produce it to you, but any investigations that arise from any credible investigation will be brought. There have been no new materials brought to me launching a new indictment.
So is the loophole here, or is it your assertion that these victims aren't credible, that the 302s maybe didn't produce credible statements that rise to a probable cause?
It's not my assertion, sir. It's the assertion of 2 different United States attorneys' offices from 3 separate administrations who investigated those same materials in lifetime.
Are the 302 documents in the FBI's possession?
They reviewed all that, yes, sir.
And so have you reviewed those 302 documents where the victims name the people who victimized them?
If I personally know, but the FBI has.
So how can you sit here and in front of the Senate and say there are no names?
I said all
I named one
information-
today.
I said, we are not in the practice at the Department of Justice and FBI of releasing victims' names. That is not what we do. We are also not in the habit of releasing incredible information. That's not what we do. But multiple authorities have looked at the entirety of what we have.
Okay, I got to move on here. Were you present when the AG had the White House event when she released the binders to the social media influencers?
I was, yes.
So if you're willing to meet with social media influencers who stood to benefit from the sensational and sad stories of these victims, will you meet with the victims as well?
The FBI will meet with anyone who has new information.
Will you personally meet with them?
The FBI and the professionals who are handling the cases will.
Were you instructed that it was important to release the documents to the Oversight Committee on the day of my introduction of the discharge petition to release these files?
I don't know what day that was, so no.
Well, they were released that day, and there were victims' names who weren't redacted because they were in such a rush, and the victims are not happy about that. Have you investigated any of the CIA connections? Have you seen the CIA file on Jeffrey Epstein? And if you wanted to see it, would they show it to you?
Well, I can speak for the FBI, and that's presuming there's a CIA case file, and I've reviewed everything that the interagency, not I, the FBI, that was provided to us.
Would you be willing to look at the CIA file on Jeffrey Epstein?
If there is such a file, and if it has not already been turned over to the FBI will look at any new investigative leads.
Have you made any progress on the pipe bomb investigation January 6th? And have you made any progress on the motive of the Las Vegas shooter?
As to the first, it's an ongoing investigation, and we have made progress. As to the second, sir, I'll have to get back to you.
All right, thank you. I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous
Gentleman
consent
yields back.
request.
Unanimous consent request from the gentleman from New York.
I ask unanimous consent to introduce an unsigned memorandum from July 7, 2025 that says we did not uncover evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties with the insignia of the Department of Justice and the FBI.
Without objection.
Because when a member of Congress stands up and reads out names that have circulated in whispers for years, then turns to the FBI director and asks, "Have you reviewed it all?" And the answer isn't clear, people notice. And what happened next sent shockwaves far beyond the hearing room. Massie didn't enter the room trying to expose anyone. He came to expose a process. And the way he did it caught Patel completely off guard. As he held up the documents, articles discussing intelligence ties, claims from old associates, references to foreign officials, calendar entries involving government figures, the tension thickened. These weren't conspiracy theories being read aloud. These were published reports, sworn statements, courtroom filings, and interview summaries that had existed for years. And as Massie listed them one by one, the atmosphere changed, because everyone understood the implication. If all of this material exists, then someone should have reviewed it. And if someone hasn't, then the system itself has a problem much bigger than any single individual. Massie's strategy wasn't about spectacle. He didn't pound the table or dramatize the moment. He simply laid out what victims, journalists, and investigators had been pointing to for over a decade. The story is larger than people want to admit. Then he asked the FBI director whether he'd personally reviewed the interview records from the 2019 New York investigation, the FD 302 forms where victims described who they were trafficked to. Patel admitted he hadn't. And that's where everything shifted, because just a day earlier, he'd publicly told the Senate that there was no credible information that Epstein had trafficked anyone to anyone else. Hearing that line, viewers naturally assumed the director had examined every page. But now he was saying he hadn't gone through the material himself. Even though the files are under his control, the contradiction wasn't explosive because it implied wrongdoing. It was explosive because it exposed a gap in the very system meant to deliver answers. Most people assume federal agencies operate with a single unified brain, that the director knows what agents know, that prosecutors share information seamlessly, that all major files from all major cases have been thoroughly reviewed at the highest levels. But Massie's questioning revealed the opposite. Information is scattered, jurisdictional boundaries matter, and responsibility can fade as it passes from one office to another. A decision made by one U.S. Attorney's office in one administration may never be revisited by the next. Files can sit for years, technically reviewed, but never fully seen by the people the public thinks are in charge. And that's why Massie pressed Patel so hard. Not to prove something controversial, but to highlight how much we still don't know simply because no one has been required to connect the dots. Patel defended the institution the way many leaders do, by speaking in generalities. He emphasized that prosecutors from multiple administrations had reviewed the files. He stressed that cases had jurisdictional limits, search warrant restrictions, old non-prosecution agreements that tied investigators' hands. But Massie cut through the cloud. Those restrictions applied to Florida in 2006 and 2007. They did not apply to the 2019 investigation in New York, where victims came forward and said they had been trafficked to individuals far beyond Epstein himself. Those statements were documented. They exist. And even if they didn't lead to charges, they are part of the historical record. When Massie listed categories: bank CEO, billionaire from Canada, former politician, major entertainer, royal figure, car company owner in Italy, high-profile government official, and others, he wasn't naming them directly. He was quoting what victims had reportedly said in interviews. He was careful to frame it the right way. These are statements, not convictions. These are recollections documented by agents, not proof. But the point was unavoidable. These accounts were taken seriously enough by the FBI to put into official 302 records. And yet the director of the FBI had not personally reviewed them. For survivors who have been waiting for accountability for years, that revelation confirmed what they've suspected. The people with the power to pursue justice may not even be reading the documents survivors risked everything to provide. That wasn't an accusation. It was an institutional reality Massie forced into the light. Victims weren't just ignored. In some cases, they felt outright dismissed, especially when the Department of Justice held a flashy event releasing binders to media personalities while failing to properly redact victims' names. Patel tried to deflect responsibility, but the damage was already done. When survivors feel the government cares more about social media attention than their privacy, trust collapses. And once trust collapses, every unanswered question becomes heavier. Massie then moved into territory few lawmakers have the nerve to bring up in public: intelligence connections. He asked Patel whether he had reviewed any CIA file on Epstein. Patel's answer was wrapped in legal caution. He said, if such a file exists, and if it hasn't already been provided, and the FBI will review any new investigative leads. Viewers have heard variations of those phrases for years, conditional statements that never confirm, never deny, never clarify. And that's exactly why suspicion never dies. The ambiguous language doesn't come from a cover-up. It comes from a culture of institutional self-protection, where every sentence is crafted to avoid contradiction, responsibility, or commitment. But in a story as emotionally charged and historically mishandled as this one, those conditional phrases feel like stone walls. When Massie pivoted to other unsolved cases, the January 6th pipe bomb investigation, the Las Vegas shooter's motive, Patel repeated familiar lines: ongoing investigation, we'll get back to you. These weren't unreasonable answers, but they reinforced the broader theme. The system is built to reveal as little as possible, even when transparency might restore trust. People don't expect perfect answers. They expect honest ones. And in that moment, watching Patel hesitate, redirect, and repeat polished lines, the audience felt the disconnect more clearly than ever. The deeper truth Massie exposed wasn't about intelligence agencies or wealthy associates or secret files. It was about how federal investigations actually operate. Most people imagine a straight line between evidence, review, and action. In reality, it's a maze. Different offices handle different pieces of a case. Some evidence is protected by grand jury secrecy. Some is limited by old agreements. Some is reviewed by one team and never seen again. When cases span decades, administrations, jurisdictions, and political climates, the result isn't conspiracy, it's fragmentation. And fragmentation produces something just as damaging: uncertainty. Uncertainty is the reason every new detail sparks debate. It's why survivors feel unheard. It's why the public feels misled. It's why every appearance by a federal official reignites questions rather than resolving them. Because for 20 years, the story has been a patchwork of partial answers, incomplete statements, cautious phrasing, and half explanations. Massey's questioning didn't introduce new information. It highlighted how incomplete the existing information still is. He wasn't accusing Patel of hiding names. He was pointing out that the country has been given conclusions without clear evidence that the people delivering those conclusions have examined everything that matters. The most human moment came when Massie asked whether Patel would meet with the victims personally. Patel said agents would meet with anyone with new information, but would not commit himself. In that single exchange, viewers saw the heart of the problem. To institutions, victims are footnotes. To survivors, this is their life story. They aren't looking for political theater. They're looking for someone in authority to sit down with them, listen to them, and treat their experiences with the seriousness they deserve. When leaders refuse to meet them, they feel like the door is permanently closed. This is why Massey's exchange struck such a nerve. It wasn't about assigning guilt to unnamed figures or suggesting wrongdoing by agencies. It was about transparency, real transparency, not press releases or staged events. The kind of transparency that demands someone at the top take responsibility for understanding the files under their jurisdiction. The kind that requires answering questions not with vague gestures toward various offices or multiple reviews, but with clarity. Who reviewed the files? What standards did they use? Why were certain paths closed? Why did some victims feel ignored? Why were some names redacted and others missed? These aren't radical questions. They're basic accountability. For the public, this moment matters because it clarifies why distrust has lasted so long. Not because the truth is hidden, but because the truth is scattered. Not because agencies are lying, but because agencies are speaking in coded language few understand. And not because there is a conspiracy, but because the system itself was not built to provide closure. Massey's questions resonate because they acknowledge the gap between what the public expects and what federal institutions deliver. The public wants straight answers. Institutions deliver cautious ones. The public wants closure. Institutions deliver process. The public wants to know whether every lead has been examined. Institutions deliver statements about resource constraints and jurisdictional boundaries. That difference is why hearings like this one matter so much. They pull back the curtain, not on hidden wrongdoing, but on the way information is managed, reviewed, or overlooked. And that's why Patel's hesitation, his conditional phrasing, his admission that he had not personally reviewed the 302s, all of it hit harder than he expected. People want to believe investigations are thorough. They want to believe survivors are heard. They want to believe someone in government is making sure nothing slips through the cracks. But when a simple question, "Have you reviewed the files?" produces uncertainty, people pay attention. This isn't about the names Massie didn't read. It's about the names survivors say they spoke aloud in interviews years ago. It's about whether those words were treated with the weight they deserved. It's about institutions reckoning with decades of mistrust. And it's about a country trying to understand why the most infamous case of the past generation still has so many loose threads. If this breakdown helped you understand what was happening beneath the surface of this moment, make sure you subscribe, share the video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next deep dive.